By January 1st, 2021, we'll lose a massive chunk of gaming history. The end of 2020 will mark the end of distribution of Flash, a media platform that let websites display animations, embed video, and most notably for this discussion, play games. Flash games on the surface aren't anything special. QWOP is probably the most infamous example of a Flash game with deceptively simple 4-button controls and scalable vector graphics. But what's notable is that this was the first successful title from Bennett Foddy, a programmer, bassist, and philosopher who has since gone on to produce games like Getting Over It, and was an artist on Ape Out. And this is just one of millions of Flash games that, if not ported to HTML5 between now and then, will disappear from the internet. Forever. Let's back up real fast. In 1995, Future Wave Software produced a Macromedia Shockwave competitor by the name of Future Splash Animator, which was then quickly bought out by Macromedia in 1996 and suffered a horrific amputation that left just Flash. Also in 1996, Neo Geo enthusiast Tom Fulp had produced a game out of Macromedia's latest acquisition. Club of Seal is exactly what it sounds like. I don't need to say anything else, I don't even need to show gameplay, I think. It's called Club of Seal, what could it be about? In 1998, Newground, a Neo Geo fan site, rebranded as Newgrounds to be a place to archive Flash content, and by 1999 had become a success hosting games, animation, audio, and artwork. And from there, I think you can tell where this is going. This isn't going to be a comprehensive history of Flash games, mostly because that would be impossible. Information is hard to come by and there's so many artists in the Flash scene. But instead, this is more of a love letter to the Flash games I grew up with and some of its most famous titles, along with a brief discussion about who is taking steps to archive all of this content. I don't remember exactly what my first Flash game was. It was something SpongeBob related that I played back in 2002, alongside the games on Candy Stand, which is now the Publishers Clearinghouse website, and they don't have any of those games anymore. But starting in about 2008, I started having more routine access to an internet-enabled computer, and this is where I began my Flash journey. What was my first Flash game though? No clue. I don't remember that, but I do remember playing Red Remover, though. This was a physics-based puzzle game where you remove red blocks and keep green blocks like a physics-based Jenga puzzle. And no, I don't remember why this was so compelling, and no, I can't explain why it's so compelling still today. It honestly might have just been because it was a free video game available to anyone with the URL. Flash games were free to play in a time where free to play actually meant something. Again, this was an age where a game asking you for your credit card info was a major red flag unless it was a subscription-based MMO, so most of their actual revenue, if any, was from ads placed on sites that hosted their games. This is why when you go to play a game on like Armor Games, you get an ad break before the game can begin. The ad company pays Armor Games, and then Armor Games would pay the developer of the game you're playing, so getting a lot of clicks and a lot of plays translates to a proper living from Flash. This is the only level. Wow, what a neat idea for a platformer. Each stage contains a new solution to complete it, so this one level has easily over 24 ways to escape. It's very clever and really satisfying. A lot like John's other game, Achievement Unlocked, which is a similar idea but with a different spin. There's a ton of achievements for everything from jumping to dying to literally preloading the game. His work is some of my favorite on the site. Exit Path is a very gritty, sorrowful runner game about fleeing a dystopian city, and his games like Loot and This Is the Only Level lampoon game design perfectly. I don't think we can talk Flash games without mentioning Doodle God. The objective is simple. You have the 4 basic elements and you combine them to produce new compounds, which you combine again and again to build up more and more objects, ideas, and eventually can bring creatures into the world, bacteria, then bugs, birds, reptiles, and eventually man. And with that comes new advancements like inventing radio. Later stages, especially in the sequel, are downright awful, as the entire final section of the game involves mixing alcoholic drinks like the Moscow Mule. And just before that, you combine the cell phone and the apple to literally make gold, but the original still holds up pretty well. Here's 2 names for you, Pandemic and Infectionator. These are both games about creating a plague that wipes out the Earth, but go about it in 2 entirely different ways. Pandemic is a more realistic approach. You earn experience points by getting your disease to spread to new countries, which you spend on new transmission options or symptoms to make your disease more communicable or deadly so you can wipe out the Earth. Kind of. There's a whole... Madagascar really doesn't want to trade with anybody, so you probably won't win this because Madagascar is going to close their frickin' doors immediately. Infectionator, on the other hand, is an action game about making a zombie army traveling from city to city. Destroying the town unlocks new places to travel, and in the sequel, the most popular of the 3, you can also pick up celebrity cameos to better terrorize populations. Both of these games live on in Steam releases, though Plague Incorporated is not made by Dark Realm Studios, with Justin Davis originally frustrated at the retail spiritual successor's success, given it's a near match gameplay-wise. He's come around to it and acknowledges that he should have jumped the gun sooner, but still, it is a different company. You know, I've never played any of the Papa's games. These were a string of games about working at a restaurant. A customer asks for a specific order and you assemble it to earn money and tips, and then a new customer shows up, rinse and repeat. The burger game is probably the most well-known of the bunch, mostly because you can pick up a condiment bottle, use it, put it down, and pick it up again to add a second layer to a burger. And there's literally nothing stopping you from just pouring mayonnaise on the bun until it extends off the top of the screen, except that the customer won't pay for it. But hey, infinite mayonnaise is free, so I literally don't care. Here comes one for you, Crush the Castle. Also known as Angry Birds Before Angry Birds, also known as Trebuchet Trouble, also known as that game where you hurl a rock at some wood, also known as, how have I gone this far without mentioning Balloons Tower Defense? The original Balloons was a game where you just threw darts at an array of balloons, think Peggle but less complex, but this series really took off with their foray into tower defense titles. Well, nowadays the game has playable characters and dozens of towers, and these games just keep getting faster. The original gives you just 5 towers to place and is nowadays incredibly antiquated compared to the rest of the series. Still, a lot of the series' tropes are here. Blue balloons move faster and contain a red balloon inside, towers have 2 upgrade trees, though only 1 upgrade per tree in this game, and Super Monkey costs a ton of money but is incredibly powerful granted they're placed in the right spot. 40 lives is a tight restriction, but hey, we can manage, right? Never mind. Oh, wait, Happy Wheels exists too. The gruesome driving game that's all level editor and no fluff. Happy Wheels kind of made a name out of itself with the biking, the exploding, the sword tossing, and the bottle riding. And while pretty much every game I've covered here today either has a retail release, has been ported to HTML5, or has a sequel that's made in HTML5 or some other engine, a lot of these original releases and thousands upon thousands of other games don't. And that's really the worry here. That's why I started making this video in the first place. Why would they stop supporting Flash though? Well, for starters, there's a lot of security issues with the platform, but it's also just old and runs really poorly on modern machines, whereas HTML5 can support the same canvases, vector graphics, and video playback Flash offers, but natively, with no plugins, and it just works. HTML5 can also do 3D much easier and much more efficiently with little headache, and runs on mobile platforms perfectly fine. While writing this video, I stumbled across Flashpoint, a project by Blue Maxima. This is a games launcher that does only Flash games. Kind of. There's some HTML5 and some Shockwave in there, but this is mostly about archiving Flash. Over 10,000 Flash games, videos too, along with Java applets, HTML5, you can make playlists of your favorite games, and all of the metadata about who made these games, and more, all saved to their servers or locally on your computer. If you want to keep the entire registry of games they've rescued, it's over 120 gigabytes and climbing. But you can download about a 600 megabyte version that offers nearly full access to these games by downloading them from their archival server. I believe this one's called Infinite. Throw the name on the screen. There you go. This is a tremendous step towards preserving the legacy of these games. Sure, I talked a bunch of the most popular games and didn't give something like the Five Nights at Freddy's personality quiz a proper moment in the sun, but Flash isn't just one boy hobbyists making and remaking the first-person Flash shooter for decades. Honestly, Flash Games' best devs are some of gaming's best devs. We've discussed Bennett Foddy already, but what about Edmund McMillen, the creator of Flash games like Gish and Super Meat Boy? Edmund created Meat Boy actually for Microsoft back in 2009, but let's be real, his biggest break was in 2011 with The Binding of Isaac, a Flash-based roguelike that straight up reinvigorated the entire genre and turned it into the behemoth that can push 1 million copies of Risk of Rain 2 in a month into its pre-release. Ed did a whole lot for a very, very strange genre, and it was all in Flash. Tom Fulp isn't just the webmaster at Newgrounds anymore, he's also a rather prolific game developer with his team at the Behemoth, with Alien Hominid launched in 2002, becoming one of the very few indie games on the GameCube, getting a proper console release with the help of Digital Zoo and Zero 3 Entertainment. And nowadays you probably know him best for Castle Crashers, Battle Block Theater, and Pit People in that order. Metonut, the team behind the Flash game N, have made 2 successor titles, the later of which is one of the highest rated games on pretty much every platform it's hit. And PopCap, whose first game was made in Shockwave in the early 2000s, have absolutely cemented themselves in gaming history with Bejeweled and Bookworm, which led them down new avenues outside of the Flash game world with the likes of Plants vs. Zombies. May they rest in peace. Flash was a revolution for gaming in every sense of the word. The idea of being able to access your favorite games from any computer, being able to share an experience with millions of other players for free. This is what created our current gaming trends. The free-to-play games as a service trend, the booming indie scene, the mobile gaming market, And I wouldn't be surprised if AAA game streaming like Google Stadia was rooted in the simplicity of going to Line Rider's website and being able to play it wherever, whenever. With Flash seeing the sunset very, very soon, I think it's only right that we do what we can to preserve all these titles. And at the very least, talk about and celebrate what made Flash unique. Even if it's just for archival purposes, to show the world where gaming was back once upon a time, in an era where anything was possible, and where indie stardom was a single FLA away. Thank you.
If you like this video and you'd like to see more, I'd recommend subscribing. Patreon and social media links are in the description.